Hi everyone, I'm Nicole Schmitz with NARAL Portraits America. I wanted to welcome everyone here. We're so happy to be co-hosting this with End Citizens United and with the League of Conservation Voters. I think I don't need to tell a lot of people in this room, Washington is failing our average Americans right now. The corruption level, the belief that there is corruption in Washington is at an all-time high. The oil and gas industry spent $126 million last cycle, I believe, to ensure that we are actually getting farther away from climate change solutions as the hurricane barrels down on a huge part of the U.S. And special interests are trying to buy a Supreme Court seat, and they're starting with someone who they know will take away our rights, and the first one of those is choice. So we're really thrilled to be here, to be a part of electing a new crop of folks to the Congress. And we're so excited to be joined by so many of the great sitting members. I am not staffed like a member of Congress, so I don't get that handy list number to me. But I understand that Congresswoman Del Bene was here, so we want to thank her for coming by. I know Congresswoman Maloney is here, so that's great. And we've got two great friends in Congressman Sarbanes, and I'm going to turn it over to Congressman Heck, who we can all thank for recruiting awesome people like this.
Thank you, Nicole. First and most importantly, I want to thank End Citizens United and NARAL and the LVC so very, very much for the work you do every day to make America better. I'm deeply, deeply grateful. Secondly, I want to apologize for the bromance, but here it goes. Anthony is a singularly spectacular candidate because, frankly, he's a singularly spectacular individual, and that's the truth of the matter. I have had the privilege to chair the candidate recruitment committee for the last 2 years. You've all heard it 1,000 times. Best class ever, immodest as it is for me to characterize it thusly. It's true, and this is the best of the best, right here. That's one of the reasons why he is doing as well as he is. Another reason I am so incredibly motivated is this is one of those districts that can ping pong just faster than an Olympics competition. And what we need to do is get somebody in that seat who can not only win it, but who can hold it. Because let me tell you, when I think about the work that the House Democrats are trying to do, it's not good enough to get the majority 55 days from now, but who's counting? What we have to do is get and keep it and build it so that we can move the chains down the field on issues that matter in the lives of people. So we need somebody that can hold that seat. And that's what Anthony is. He can hold, he can win it, and then he can hold it. Finally, let me say this. And there aren't very many districts in this country, as I travel it, that I say this about. But I say this in all sincerity, meant to underscore the depth of my gratitude for your presence and the importance of this race. We've now been joined by Congressman and one of my best friends, Earl Blumenauer, as announced on the DCA public address system. Did you hear that? Will Earl Blumenauer please report to the information desk as we get off the plane? Earl Blumenauer from Oregon. Finally, let me say this about my friend Anthony. And again, I don't say this about very many districts because this is a political capital expenditure that I measure very carefully. So I make sure that when I say it, it is authentic. We don't get the majority without this man. That's a fact. If Anthony doesn't win, we're not going to be in the majority. And that's not true across the board. The fact of the matter is we have them on the defensive in 30-some seats, really on the defensive. We've got 72 red to blue seats. We've got them on the run. But there's a handful in there upon whom rests the outcome of November 6th. And Anthony is one of them. Oh, I guess lastly I should say, can't help it, this attraction to his ethnic heritage. Now, I'm a newlywed. I've only been married to my wife for 42 years. She is a first-generation Italian-American, so it doesn't speak well of me. Any candidate whose last name ends in a vowel, I'm all in on. And even if it weren't for the fact that, again, he's the best of the best, and we have to have him. So thank you for being here very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it's my pleasure to turn it over to one of the great voices, the #1 voice in America. Not just the House Democratic Caucus, not just the House, not just the Congress, but the #1 voice in America for reforming our system and making sure this process functions in a way and under rules that work for everybody. And that's my friend John Sarbanes.
Thanks, Danny. Thank you. I guess I'll come over. Scoot in here.
There's plenty of room.
This bromance going on. It's great to be here. First of all, let me thank Danny for his recruitment efforts. But whatever that group was that was put together, the chief of recruitment of Democratic candidates, we have to acknowledge, was Donald Trump, right? He's the guy who's recruiting all these people because he set off a chain reaction when he got in there. But connecting with these people, nurturing them, and encouraging them has been the job of Denny and others, and I want to thank him for that, because we do have the most incredible slate of candidates that has ever been deployed in a congressional race, midterm, anything. As far as I can remember, and potentially I think in history, when you look at the diversity of the candidates, their talents, their experience, and Anthony's no exception to that. I want to thank NARAL for their incredible work. I want to thank the League of Conservation Voters, and I want to thank Citizens United. I said that this morning that Citizens United sprang up on this wave of anger and resentment over the Citizens United case, which was this grave miscarriage of justice perpetrated upon the American people by the Supreme Court. But they have channeled the anger and resentment around that decision towards an effort to really put serious reforms in place for our democracy. And so it's been a pleasure to team up with ECU along the way and make the point that we can fix this. We can clean up the REAP system. People are so overwhelmed now by the scandal of the day. Every single breaking development, it seems like, or every other breaking development has to do with some scandal, some ethical morass, the blindness of this administration and their allies in Congress when it comes to ethics and accountability and transparency is breathtaking, to say the least. People can't keep up with that. They just want it to stop. That's what we're hearing from them. Make it stop. And so all across the country, our candidates, that includes sitting members of Congress who are running again, and it includes all these amazing challengers, are saying we got a plan to make it stop. We've got a set of concrete proposals. Voting rights, voter empowerment, make sure we respect the American voter, lift up people who just want to get to the ballot box and be heard. Let's make it easier, not harder, to vote in America. Ethics and accountability. When you go to Washington, behave yourself, right? That's a simple directive. Just behave ethically. Abide by conflict of interest rules. Why should that be so hard, right? So we got to strengthen all of the oversight that goes with accountability and ethics. And then the third thing is campaign finance reform. Because people are saying to us, when you go to Washington, don't get tangled up in the money. Keep working for us. Don't get captured by the special interests and the insiders and the money crowd. Don't forget about the people who sent you there. This is what folks out there in the country want to see. And what I'm excited about with Anthony's campaign is not only his emphasis on education, because I worked in education for 20 years, and I understand how critical that issue is for opportunity in our society across the board. But he's also leaning in on this reform message. It's an issue that he's talked about on the campaign trail. He's profiling it on his website and in his materials. He understands clearly that it is an issue that garners bipartisan support out in the country. You wouldn't know it from our Republican colleagues because they will not subscribe to this reform. But when you talk to Republicans, independents, and Democrats across the country at the grassroots, they want to see this. Let's face it, Donald Trump traded on that sentiment in the Republican Party to get to Washington because people were so fed up. Unfortunately, he's not draining the swamp. As Nancy Pelosi says, he's turning it into a cesspool. So we have to address it in a meaningful way. Anthony understands that. He understands the appeal of that. He's leaning in on it, and it's why I'm very privileged and honored to be supporting him, because I think if we can get people like him there, and I agree with what you said, Becky. If we don't get him, we don't get the gavel. If we do get him, we do get the gavel. But if we get the gavel with people like Anthony Brindisi, then we've got an obligation to move fast to show the American people they haven't just traded in one party that's bought and sold for another party that's bought and sold. They've embraced a new way of doing things in Washington with people like Anthony leading the way. So thank you for being here to support him tonight. I appreciate it. Blumenauer, that's the correct pronunciation of his name, by the way.
Let Alaska Airlines know, please.
Outstanding member of Congress. He wears that bike lapel pin everywhere he goes. That's how you know it's Earl from far away. But actually somebody who, when I first got to Congress 12 years ago, was very generous with his time and perspective. So he's a key member of our caucus. I'm glad to have him here. Why don't I turn it over to you, Earl?
Well, I've been waiting for a few minutes, for months to hang out with you.
Me too.
This campaign is personal for me, not just because of who you're running against. I've invested a lot in this district. I've traveled it. I campaigned for several days with Mike back in the day. And actually, I was pleasantly surprised. I was disappointed when he lost. But the person who replaced him, Richard Hanna, ended up being one of my best friends. We hang out and we continue. And Richard Hanna cares deeply about this. He says, look into this guy. I've contributed to it. You get on board. And he's right. The district deserves better. It is critical to the majority. And having people like Anthony, who have other things they could be doing with their lives, who's no stranger to rough and tumble politics. You know how to legislate. You've got a track record. Some days you just get overwhelmed by the tidal wave of crazy news. But being able to get on the phone to some of our candidates kind of sets you in perspective and moves you forward. I do have a bone to pick with Denny. I think you were too successful in what you've done. I've spent more money on amazing candidates who I think can get us there. But we're following only 73 races. But there's nobody. This is the final installment. I maxed to him in a primary, maxed to him in a general, my personal campaign, and there's another contribution in there from a guy who's a cycling enthusiast. And when he heard about you, agreed to sign on. We appreciate what you are doing. We appreciate what you can bring to the party. And get rid of somebody who's not bringing much to us.
That's right. That's right.
So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Thank
And
you.
looking forward to serving you.
We should acknowledge the presence of Congressman Brad Schneider from Illinois 10, a great member of the House. And for those of you who have not been here a long time, not to step on Earl's punchline, but former Congressman Richard Hanna, who has endorsed and written a check to Anthony, was a Republican member of Congress. That's how strongly he feels about the need for change in this congressional district.
So I think what we all want to hear from is the amazing Tiffany Mueller, who actually put this all together, is the Executive Director and President of End Citizens United.
We just call it El Jefe.
And
And it's Mueller, like Bob Mueller.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. But now you'll remember.
I will.
Because, you just have to pair it up with them. Look, I actually know who we really all want to hear from is Anthony, so I promise to keep this much shorter than all the congressional members did. Look, everyone is right. This is the most amazing class of candidates that I've ever seen, and I've been doing this work a while, and when you live here and you work in it, it's really easy to become cynical and listen to the pundits say why something's impossible or why you can't do something. And this class of candidates not only makes me believe that yes, obviously we can take back the House, but that we can make real change and make meaningful change and actually give hope back to people across the country. And I don't say that lightly. I truly believe that, and it inspires me each and every day to get up and work. And so at In-Citizens United, us and our 4 million members are working to elect great candidates like Anthony across the country. But Anthony is one of our top 10 races. We don't take back the majority unless we get him in. And he is such a champion on the issue of reform. And you know what? He's got this long history that shows you exactly what kind of congressional member he'll be. He was a Utica school board member, New York State Assemblyman. He's fought for public education, fought to bring good jobs to his district. More importantly, he stood up against his own party to root out corruption. And we know what kind of current member we have in this seat, in Claudia Tenney. We actually put her on our Big Money 20 list, which is a list of 20 Republicans in Congress who really represent the worst of the pay-to-play culture in Washington. Now, she took over $100,000 from the Wall Street big banks and then voted to gut the CFPB that's supposed to help protect consumers. And what did Anthony do? He leaned in and said, I'm not going to take any corporate PAC money because I want the voters of my district to have full faith that every single decision I make is for them and not for any special interest. And he is the kind of leader and the ethics and the character that we need. So we are all in. And we need all of you to be all in too, as I look at like many of my staff. Staff, I need you to. Where's your personal check? That means I have to give them a raise.
You heard it here.
So I know that what we really want to do is hear from Anthony and hear how the race is going. So, Anthony.
All right. Well, first, thank you, ECU. You guys have been great supporters and great helping me with messaging and really talking about an issue that resonates back home on both sides of the aisle. Trying to get dark money out of politics is something that we are talking about every day on the campaign trail, and something that we're really using to hold our opponent accountable for the votes that she has taken over the last few years as she's served in Congress. NARAL Pro-Choice, thank you so much, and League of Conservation Voters. You guys have been early supporters, and I appreciate the work. I've had a chance to work with both organizations at the state level and look forward to working more with you guys at the federal level. And to all the members of Congress in the room, you all have been great supporters of the campaign. I can't say enough about the help that you've given me financially, but also helping to spread the word among other members in Congress to come out and help support the campaign. I remember the phone call that I got from Congressman Heck. I was in Albany, in the legislature, in the hotel room, and I started thinking to myself, damn, I really got to start thinking about this now, because he put a bug in my ear, and it really made me think. And you're right that Donald Trump really is the reason. He's the best recruiter for many of the people that are running this year. After 2016, two things happened in that election that I never dreamed would ever happen in my lifetime. I never thought Donald Trump would become the President of the United States. I don't think he thought that. And I never thought that Claudia Tenney, who always says that she was Donald Trump before Donald Trump, would become the representative for the 22nd Congressional District. For those of you who aren't familiar with this part of upstate New York, it's an area that's always been represented by more moderate members on both sides of the aisle. You know, when I was growing up, my congressman was Sherwood Bowler, who was so strong on the environment, a real Rockefeller Republican, someone who had common sense and sat down and listened to both sides of the issue. Mike Carcieri followed Sherry Bowler, a Blue Dog Democrat, someone who really worked hard in the district, listening to constituents and working on issues. And then Richard Hanna, someone who is supporting this campaign, someone who I look up to, and someone who I talk to probably twice a week. Actually, he said he's going to be coming out to Oregon because he's a pilot. He owns an airplane, and he has a plane in Oregon right now, so he'll be coming out to pick it up pretty soon. He wanted me to tell you that. But he is someone who was such a good representative for our area because he didn't care if you were a Democrat or Republican. He sat down with everybody and worked on issues and really tried to vote in the best interest of people in upstate New York. And he respected both sides of the aisle. This member of Congress that we have right now doesn't respect our side of the aisle, the Democratic side of the aisle, and outright offends people by the statements that she makes. You all know some of the hits that she has said over the last 2 years. You know, after Parkland, you know, a very sensitive time in our country's history, she goes on and talks about how all these mass shootings end up being committed by Democrats. She calls Democrats un-American because they don't stand for the president during the State of the Union. She goes on and talks about domestic violence after the Rob Porter situation in the White House and says domestic violence is not a crime of character. She's on the radio this morning talking about the DOJ and the FBI and how they're colluding to frame Donald Trump in this campaign. That's the kind of representative we have right now in the 22nd district. So it's not only important to get a Democratic majority, but it's also important to get someone like this out of office, because the rhetoric that they spew every single day in the district and nationally is toxic to this climate, and something we have to get away from if we're ever going to turn this country around. I've had a long track record in the state legislature working with both sides of the aisle, working with Democrats and Republicans, never being afraid to take on my own party leadership in the state assembly when they were doing things that I felt were corrupt and against the interests of New Yorkers. And that's something I pledge to do in Washington and tell voters about every day on the campaign trail. To me, the most important quality that I can have, and something we don't have right now with Claudia Tenney, is to be a good listener. Because folks in the 22nd district don't feel that their current member of Congress is listening to them. She's not doing the town hall meetings. She's not showing up in the district. She's listening to somebody, but it's not people that sent her to Washington. And you can tell in the votes that she's taken, whether it's to repeal the Affordable Care Act and kick people off of their health insurance, whether it's the tax bill, which particularly hurts states like New York, and to be in the minority of Republicans in the House in New York to vote for that tax bill, or other votes on internet privacy, the environment, you name it. She has taken the wrong vote on every single issue, and we are holding her accountable and really pointing out the money that she has taken from the interest groups that have really benefited from the votes that she has made. We're moving in the right direction. This district has 30,000 more Republicans in it. Donald Trump won this district by 15 points. 2012, Obama and Romney split this district evenly. Romney won it by less than a percentage point. Despite that, we have led in every single poll, whether internal or independent poll in this race. So we can flip this district. She's now the number 5 most vulnerable House Republican according to Roll Call magazine. Every rating agency, Cook and all of them, have listed this district as a toss-up. It was a likely Republican seat when I jumped in the race. So we can win this race. Our biggest challenge right now, because we have relatively inexpensive media markets, is fighting back on some of the negative attacks that the Congressional Leadership Fund, which is Paul Ryan's super PAC, is running on TV right now. They're not running a positive message about Claudia Tenney because she doesn't have a positive message to run on. They're going to try and paint me as someone I'm not, and they've spent over $1 million in the last month alone on negative TV commercials. We've stayed competitive, but we've had to up our budget on TV to make sure that we're putting our positive message out there about education, about Social Security, about Medicare, about working to bring jobs to the district. And we've also had to respond to some of the claims that she's making that I just can't let stand in the district. And when you talk about dark money in politics, she has big corporations that are helping her get that message out and not getting my message on the air. One of the issues that I always like to localize issues, and especially when it comes to the tax bill. And one of the things that really has gotten a lot of people in upstate New York up in arms is the cable bill. No one likes the cable company. The cable company happens to be Spectrum, which is owned by Charter. And we try to point out the benefits that they got under this tax bill. $9.3 billion, they were the beneficiary of that much money in this tax cut. They have used that money to invest in their shareholders by buybacks, $500 million in buybacks. They're fighting with the union that represents their workers. They're raising people's cable bills 40 and 50%. They have the monopoly in upstate New York. We don't have a lot of competition when it comes to cable providers. They got the monopoly. and they're not expanding into smaller communities in rural areas. So I have pointed that out. I've been leading a battle in the state against Spectrum, calling for investigations into this company because of the way they've been taking advantage of consumers. And we had a TV commercial that talked about some of this, how they gave $15,000 to Claudia Tenney in her campaign, and they refused to run it on their air. It was the subject of a New York Times article, how a cable company was censoring a congressional candidate. But we fought back, and we had to go to the FCC, and finally we got the ad on TV. But this is just another example of a company who is part of that system. It's a big beneficiary of the tax cut, helping people like Claudia Tenney who are enabling their corporate greed and really trying to censor a candidate who's speaking out against them. That's what we got to stand up against in this campaign, and that's what I'm pointing out to voters every day on the campaign trail. We can win this race. I know we can win this race as long as we stay competitive till Election Day, and we will win this race. I want to thank everyone who's here today. I'm happy to take any questions on policy or any questions about the campaign you guys might have. But again, thank you for your support, because without it, I can't do what I'm doing, and we can't take back the House. So, thank you.
Questions?
Well, I just want to say, I'm a New Yorker, so I know how hard he's working. He's all over the place, including my district. He's campaigning everywhere. He's got both hands on the throttle, and he's going to win. I just want to know, Anthony, what are they saying against you? What are the negative ads, so I can think of how you counter them?
Sure. So, in my neck of the woods, Governor Cuomo is not the most popular person. So there's a lot of TV commercials about me and Governor Cuomo, and there's been many allegations of corruption in the state against him and people in his office, and she's tried to tie me to all of that. When the fact is that I've actually been, in my time in the state assembly, someone who's stood up to Governor Cuomo. We have worked together on issues that can benefit the assembly district that I represent, but on issues that I disagree with him on, certainly around public education, I've gone toe-to-toe with him. So I've had to respond to some of those attacks by pointing out my record of independence. And then it's the usual stuff. It's Anthony's for open borders, Anthony wants to give Medicare to undocumented immigrants, Anthony wants to abolish ICE, all that stuff. Whenever there's a statement made out that gets national attention, they will try to tie me to whoever the person is making that
Is
statement.
Trump going into that district?
He was there a few weeks ago. He came in to
Was
do
he booed?
There was about 2,000 protesters that showed up. He came in to do a fundraiser for Claudia Tenney. If you could afford $15,000, you could get in and get a picture with him. In upstate New York, where the average household income in this district is about $48,000, you can't imagine too many people from the district went to the fundraiser. But we had some fun that night. We did our own fundraiser for $10 a head, and we had 700 people show up. So we were very happy with that.
More of a quick thank you and then a question.
Yes.
Wonky question. My thank you is for being a part of the bipartisan pro-choice caucus
Yes.
as state legislator in New York. That's really great. As someone who hopes after this election at the state legislative level, New York becomes a state that passes proactive legislation to expand reproductive freedom.
Right.
I was just personally curious, because I'm not as familiar down ballot in
Yep.
New York, even though I'm from New York. Are there any competitive state Senate districts that overlap, and what are you doing to help lift all votes down ballot with your race?
Yep. In my area, I gotta say, I'm surrounded by a lot of Republican state senators,
Got it.
and it's certainly a more red part of the state.
Got it.
So there's not a whole lot of competitive. More down in the Hudson Valley, Long Island, there's some competitive state senate races. And you're right, we've passed every year in the state assembly the Women's Equality Agenda, which the final plank of that is codifying Roe v. Wade into state law, because our laws on this topic were written prior to Roe v. Wade. And if the Supreme Court does what many think they may do, if this justice is confirmed, then it gets kicked back to the state. And with a state that doesn't have that codified into law, it's back to the old way. So hopefully we can flip the state senate into Democratic control, because we have a Republican state senate right now, and we can pass that final plank to codify Roe versus Wade into state law. Thank you.
And I'm just going to jump in. I want to give you a little bit of help.
Well, thank you.
As someone who has been
Yay.
in race, As someone who's been in races on the receiving end of help from colleagues and folks like you, I can't tell you how important it is. I know the difference it makes. These races are won and lost on the margins, and the help you give makes the difference between Anthony being able to get his message out and knock on more doors, make more phone calls, do the things that are necessary so that we win on the margin. So it is my honor to
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate it, Congressman.
I just want to say, as one who just got through a terrible primary.
Yes.
That the support that your organizations give, NARAL, League of Conservation of Voters, and Citizens United. I began my career working for campaign finance. Believe it or not, I was a lobbyist for Common Cause in the New York State Legislature to pass campaign finance laws. They never passed it. Never passed it. We passed it on the city council. I passed it in the city council, and then later in Congress. And then came Citizens United. Another terrible thing about Citizens United, they say corporations are people, and then they say women are not in the Constitution. Corporations are in the Constitution. They're people, but we're not in the Constitution. So we've got a lot of work when we get back. Thank you all for what you've been doing. You're on fire, and it means so much when you're a candidate to know that great organizations like yours are behind you. Really, really means a lot. And I hope you're mailing into your membership into this district.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you, Congresswoman. All right, people, drink wine.
thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right.
I just love your shirt. Thank you. I just love it. Thank you very much.